It's the SNP's annual party conference in Perth, and the former leader, Alex Salmond, has just got up to make his farewell speech. Let's listen in to what he has to say.
Well, thank you, Nicola, and thank you, conference. Listening to what you had to say, waiting in the wings there, Nicola, I came to a decision. I have decided not. I have decided not to stand for the Westminster Parliament in Lewes in East Sussex. West Sussex, maybe. But as I said, if the good people of East Sussex think I'm as big a danger to the Westminster Parliament as Guy Fawkes, then they're right. But friends, as I stand here before you today, the Scottish National Party has a massive lead in the polls at both Holyrood and Westminster. As of this morning, we now have 85,101 members. And we have made a substantial contribution to what is now widely recognised as the most empowering democratic process these islands have ever witnessed. I feel a bit like Mark Twain, who was amused to arrive in London to newspaper billboards proclaiming at the top, "Mark Twain arrives," and at the bottom, "Gold cups stolen," as if the two things were connected. In Edinburgh, I'm imagining billboards which say at the top, "Alex Salmond leaves," and at the bottom, "SNP membership trebles." But as I look out on each and every one of you, and I think of the 1.6 million people who stood with us on the 18th September 2014, let me start by simply saying this to you: thank you. Thank you for believing in this country. Thank you for working to persuade these 1.6 million people. Thank you for transforming this nation. The referendum vote was 45%, not 55%, but let us proclaim what each of us knows now with a greater certainty than ever before. Scotland will become an independent nation. Because today I want to affirm what we did achieve on the 18th of September. Because while we lost the vote, we also won a great deal. At various times in our national story, Scotland has managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. This time, out of defeat will come future success. The 18th September 2014 will be seen as the day that Scotland started to take control of our own destiny. It was a day of empowerment, of engagement, of confidence. It reawakened in millions of Scots a sense of purpose. It ended forever the top-down politics of the past and ushered in a new era of engaged politics, the envy of the democratic world. So regardless of yes and no, let us all agree that from the 18th September 2014, the clear winner must be Scotland. And why is that? Because despite everything that the Westminster establishment threw at Scotland, the fears, the smears, the lies, the scares, 45% of the people, 1.6 million women and men living and working in Scotland, chose hope over fear. A much higher number than any of our opponents thought possible when we started this campaign. And after the referendum, the same opponents believed that Scotland had been quietened down, that we'd had our day in the sun, that we should gently be put back into our box. They thought it was all over. Well, it isn't now. For Scotland, all has changed, and changed utterly. Because of the 55% who voted no, many did so on the last-minute promise of radical constitutional reform within the Union. Be in no doubt, without that last-gasp concession, the No campaign would have had its just deserts. Without that desperate vow of maximum devolution, Scotland would already be in a process of becoming independent. A cynical ploy, a last-minute bribe, certainly. A desperate response to a Yes campaign that was gaining such ground, absolutely. But for many it was enough to convince them to give the Union one more drink at the Last Chance saloon. For some it was an argument for saying not yet rather than yes. As a Democrat, I respect that decision, but conference, let me tell you this. If the Westminster gang reneges on that promise, they will discover that hell have no fury like a nation scorned. Now, Gordon Brown had a brief cameo as leader of Better Together. Gordon Brown, a man with credibility, who stood surety for the vow of the three Westminster leaders who had none, or the three amigos, as Brian Cox so memorably termed them. And let us remember Gordon Brown's words. We're going to be, within a year or two, as close to a federal state as you could be. He pledged home rule. His words, not mine. And so that is now the yardstick by which the Smith Commission will be measured. And each of the parties in that commission needs to understand one thing very clearly. Scotland expects the vow to be redeemed. Of course, Labour and Tory will try to renege on their commitments to Scotland. The Prime Minister will try to renege. That's what Tory Prime Ministers do. Westminster, Labour will try to renege. That's why Joanne Lamont called them dinosaurs. But let no one imagine the collective will of the Scottish people will be defeated, not now and not ever. And of course that poses a real challenge for this party too. How we carry ourselves after a defeat is every bit as important as how we celebrate a victory. The nation expects us to accept the referendum result with dignity and grace. As Democrats, we did so. But it also expects us to champion Scotland's national interest in the vital months and years to come. As Scottish patriots, we will. That's why we meet as a party, invigorated as never before. Far from reflecting on what might have been, we are focused on what now must be. Our job is incomplete, but our role is clear. First, last and always, this party will argue Scotland's cause. Delegates, today I want to reflect a little, as you might expect, on the remarkable journey of our party, our government and of our nation. 24 years ago, I was elected leader of the SNP just across the road at the City Hall. The SNP had 4 members of Parliament in a Westminster Parliament of 650. It was a different time. I didn't need to diet then. But the country was in the grip of high Thatcherism. This prospect of even a Scottish Assembly seemed a distant dream. Now we have 72 parliamentarians across 3 parliaments. We have more councillors than any other party. We have won the last 2 European elections. We hold the majority in our own national parliament. Conference, let us now set a target of winning our first UK general election in Scotland. Together we will ensure that the vow made to Scotland shall be redeemed in full. Ten years ago, I was re-elected in a partnership leadership with Nicola. And then the SNP had 8,000 members. We actually signed the 8,000 member at our party conference. It was Bashir Ahmed's daughter who was our 8,000th member. We now have 10 times that number, ready and willing to pick up the gauntlet for Scotland. We have never been an ordinary political party, but now we are an extraordinary political party with a great task to be completed. Next week, our conference reconvenes in the Hydro Arena in Glasgow, the largest ever political conference across these islands. We are a party renewed. Let us resolve to involve each and every member in the work that lies before us, in the selection of candidates in the election to come. And let us be open and generous to allow some of the shining stars of the Yes movement to stand under the SNP banner, reflecting the historic shift that has taken place. These groups that emerged from the grassroots were wonderful. Women for Independence, Business for Scotland, the National Collective, and many, many more. Let us embrace them as candidates and ask our people a simple question. Who would you rather have representing this nation? The new people who awoke the national spirit, or the old Westminster parties who have done their best to break it? And let us set ourselves a target and a challenge. Let us select our candidates from the best that Scotland has to offer and send them into battle with an army of activists. Our party has more than tripled in size, but it can still grow further yet by reaching out further to the people. Let us ensure that by next May's election, the SNP reaches a level which is never achieved before by any political party in the history of Scottish politics. 100,000 members to argue for the national cause. And so this party has changed, but so has the governance of Scotland. It has also changed, and changed utterly. 24 years ago, the Lord Lang was Secretary of State. The poll tax was still in place. Ravenscraig was about to be closed. A party with no mandate ruled the roost, both desocialising and deindustrialising Scotland. 10 years ago, we had gained a parliament, but it was run by a coalition devoid of any vision to strike an independent course from their Westminster masters. The executive didn't even have the guts to call themselves a government. Alas, poor government, afraid even to speak their name. In these days, Labour were run as a branch office from London. Plus ça change. That one was for Christian Allard. But 7 years later, the entire governance of Scotland has been transformed. I don't stand before you today and say that everything is perfect. How could it be in austerity Britain? Scotland, like all countries, faces great challenges. There's plenty of work to be done. But I have been proud to lead a government with a record of achievement. During a time of extraordinary economic pressure, We have saved the average family in Scotland £1,200 by freezing the council tax. We have put 1,000 extra police officers on the streets, and crime is at a 40-year low in Scotland. We have slashed business rates, allowing 96,000 small and medium enterprises the length and breadth of our country the opportunity to thrive. Despite the foolhardy privatisation agenda south of the border, we have protected Scotland's National Health Service, ensuring a service that will remain in public hands. And delegates, as somebody who grew up in a council house in Linlithgow and went on to be educated without charge at St Andrews University, I'm proud to have led a government when the rocks did not melt with the sun, where tuition fees were abolished and the right to free education was restored to Scotland's young people. And friends, this is thanks to a financial magician at the heart of government. Let's hear it for a man Scotland's Merlin, John Swinney, the only finance minister in Europe to pursue successfully a balanced budget. John Swinney. Through the years of recession, we have sought to protect the social fabric of Scotland. We understand the basic wisdom of Adam Smith. No society can be flourishing and happy of which the greater part of its number are poor and miserable. And thus we acted to protect the people from the injustice of the bedroom tax. We retained the educational maintenance allowance to support youngsters from poorer backgrounds to stay in education. We acted with local government to protect 500,000 low-income Scots from increases in their council tax. We introduced a progressive land transaction tax to replace the discredited stamp duty, demonstrating how to combine economic efficiency with equity. But one of our finest measures, delegates, is the introduction of the living wage, introduced into the teeth of recession in 2011. We acted to introduce the living wage, shortly to move to £7.85 an hour for the public sector in Scotland, a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Conference, in politics, actions speak much louder than words, and this party should be immensely proud of its record. But what has really changed in recent years is our country and Scotland's perception of itself. 24 years ago, we were locked in the Tory trap. 10 years ago, most Scots still looked to Labour for their salvation. Now we understand the solution will not come from on high, but from within ourselves. Delegates, in the midst of the Commonwealth Games, I witnessed something wonderful. And not just the commitment and skill of our athletes, although there was plenty of that. Not just the determination to host the best Commonwealth Games in history, although we did achieve exactly that. Not even the friendship and solidarity of people from 70 countries and territories around the globe, although we all experienced that. What I witnessed one day during the Games was an excerpt of a Scottish Youth Theatre production of a play called Now's the Hour. This involved youngsters imagining and reading letters written today to their future selves about the decisions that Scotland was to make this year. I only saw an excerpt from that play, but it touched the very essence of what this year has been about. Indeed, it touched the very heart of what Scotland is about. Another play, Tin Forest, included 90 performers from 10 of the Commonwealth countries. In our glittering Games, the Scottish Youth Theatre were one of the true stars of the show. Now the Youth Theatre is in financial difficulty, and we cannot in conscience have that. I just won't have that. And therefore, Conference, I'm delighted to announce that working with Creative Scotland and with generous private sector support from one of our greatest companies, Clyde Blowers, the Scottish Government will provide £1 million over the next 3 years to secure the future of the Scottish Youth Theatre. Friends, we've come a long way, but we have a step further still to travel. You know, it must be infuriating for our unionist opponents to see us lose the referendum and then go on to prosper. They are totally disorientated. They cannot understand what on earth is going on. The reason is actually quite simple. For us, the referendum was never about party. It was always about country. And because we understand that most people, yes voters and no voters, still want to see the country prosper, we are trusted by most voters to do exactly that. Advancing the Scottish national interest is what we do as a party, is in our DNA. So starting now and until we have secured for Scotland what we were promised, our job is to hold Westminster's feet to the fire. That's why voting SNP is now more important than ever. And the yes vote we shall ask for next May, next year, will be a simple one. Yes to the devolution of job-creating powers, social security, broadcasting, pensions and much else beside. Yes to a Parliament which really controls Scotland's finances. Yes, above all, to the presumption that those who live and work here are the best people to run our own affairs. The UK parties should be in no doubt. Give Scots the power, or we demand, or Scotland will vote to take that power. Now, we should remember, of course, that consistency doesn't come easily to our unionist parties. After all, so much of what was said by our opponents during the referendum has already been abandoned. Before the referendum, it was claimed by our unionist opponents there was no threat to Scotland's funding from Tory privatisation of the National Health Service south of the border. Now, Ed Miliband says that the very future of the National Health Service will be on the ballot paper at next May's election. Of course, Ed himself may or may not be on the ballot paper next May. And then there is Europe. Something quite astonishing has happened to the status of the outgoing President of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso. Before the referendum, according to our unionist opponents, he was the all-powerful voice of Europe, setting out the unchallengeable truths of the impossibility of Scottish independence. Now it seems that wasn't quite right. Mr Barroso recently said that Mr Cameron's plan for the EU to abandon free movement of labour just couldn't work. Would you believe it? According to the self-same Tories, poor Mr Barroso, the once omnipotent authority, is now a mere unelected bureaucrat, a man who mustn't be taken seriously If only, delegates, we'd known that before September. Before the referendum, we were told that Scotland's vast renewable energy resources were not needed by the rest of the United Kingdom. Now we're told that UK electricity capacity is at a 7-year low and the people of England are facing brownouts and perhaps blackouts. And have you noticed, delegates, how many new oil fields have suddenly been discovered in the central North Sea? By BP and a variety of other companies. The truth is this, for Labour and Tory, desperate times called for desperate measures. Rattled by the Yes campaign, the Unionist parties were prepared to say and do anything to preserve the status quo. As Scotland dared to dream, Labour offered nothing but nightmares. When Scotland was alive with ideas and debate, all Labour could demonstrate was timidity and fear. The next Labour leader in Scotland inherits an intellectually bankrupt and politically hollow organisation. Joanne Lamont deserves praise for her honesty in confirming what we all knew, that the Scottish Labour Party was treated by London Labour as a branch office. And why should the people of Scotland care about that? Let me tell you. Because Joanne Lamont has also revealed that at a time when Scottish politicians should have been standing together, presenting a united Scottish front against the bedroom tax, she was silenced for a year, awaiting permission from Ed Miliband to speak out. A Labour Party that needs to speak out, that needs permission to speak out against the bedroom tax, isn't a Labour Party at all, and a branch office ain't a Scottish Labour Party. And Labour in Scotland are already paying the price for standing shoulder to shoulder with the Tories. So reduced have they become that rather than rise to the greatest democratic occasion in Scottish history, they sank into the Tory maw. But if the Labour think Scots will just forgive and forget, they are deeply mistaken. To save the time and money and the need for sophisticated polling analysis, let me spell out exactly for the next Labour leader precisely why their party is in terminal decline in Scotland. Labour didn't trust Scotland, and now Scotland doesn't trust Labour. One of their candidates for office actually said the other night that Scotland was in danger of letting Labour down. Scotland hasn't let Labour down. Labour has let Scotland down. But for us, for this party, for this movement, we look forwards, not back. We look to the next election, not the last. And in 2015, the Westminster election offers a real possibility of putting Scotland in the driving seat. As Labour implodes with an unelectable leader, so the Tories march to the beat of a UKIP drum. And in that lurch to the right lies enormous dangers and risk for Scotland. Exit from the European Union, which would be a disaster for the Scottish people. Deeper, faster spending cuts aimed at the poor. An immigration policy based on the politics of fear. Privatisation of the NHS. Friends, that isn't an example of a strong United Kingdom, a partnership of nations. It's an abhorrent and divisive agenda of which we should have no part. Conference, much has changed, but one thing has remained consistent. When it comes to standing up for Scotland, you cannot trust the Conservative Party. Scots watched open-mouthed on the morning of the 19th September as the Prime Minister walked from Downing Street to face the cameras. He acknowledged the need to implement change in a few short paragraphs before emphasising and moving on to his main position, the need for change in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and adding that all of this must take place in tandem with, and just in case we didn't understand what that meant, at the same pace as, the settlement for Scotland. There it was, the screech of the Westminster brakes being applied as the ink on the ballot papers around Scotland was barely dry. It was a cynical, depressing attempt to pander to the Tory backbenches at the expense of Scotland's democratic will. Only David Cameron could take a groundswell for Scottish independence to be a mandate for reform in England. So let the message be very clear from this hall and from this country to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, delay, prevaricate, block or obstruct the implementation of what Scotland was promised, and Scotland will take matters into our own democratic hands. So our message to every voter in Scotland must be clear. Only a vote for the SNP next year can force Westminster to deliver on its promises to Scotland. And getting that vote next year depends on you, the members of this party. In this, our 80th annual conference, we rejoice in the knowledge and the experience of having 85,000 members. In welcoming every one of these new members, I say this: you are the spirit of the referendum. You define and represent a nation which has become one of the most politically charged anywhere in the democratic world. Your choice to join us, your restless desire for change, are what will fuel the final stage of Scotland's journey. Delegates, there are now twice as many SNP members in Scotland as the Liberal Democrats have across the entire United Kingdom. This is a fact that needs to be heard loud and clear by the UK broadcasters. It's just one reason, just one. Just one reason why any attempt to exclude this party from leaders' debates in next year's general election would be scandalous, an affront to democracy, an insult to Scotland. So no ifs, no buts. Our leader, Nicola Sturgeon, must be an equal participant in any televised general election debate. Today I cease to be leader of the party, but that is not the beginning or the end of leadership. Real leadership is about our members being champions of change in communities all over Scotland. How we carry that responsibility and engage with our communities will inform how far and how fast we move to independence. And that's why it's you and thousands like you who will always be the real leaders of this movement. In Nicola Sturgeon, we have a woman of extraordinary talent to take this party forward. I have not the slightest doubt that she will serve this country with enormous distinction when elected by the Scots Parliament as our First Minister. As one era ends, so another begins. Nicola, your contribution to where this party now stands has already been immense. Your future contribution, I have no doubt, will be to make history. Delegates, as we prepare for the 2015 and the 2016 elections, our message of hope and ambition is matched by a demonstration of what we have achieved. Because self-government for Scotland has never been about achieving power for its own sake. It has been about having power to improve the lives of the people who live and work here in Scotland. That's why we've worked so hard to demonstrate what can be done within devolved government. Constitutional reform means nothing without a tangible benefit for the people of Scotland. Since 2007, we've delivered Scotland's first minority government and Scotland's first majority government. Let me be clear, without the success of that minority government, there would have been no majority government. And without that majority government, there could have been no referendum. We have improved the condition of our people at home. We have put Scotland back on the global map. The eyes of the world were fixed on Scotland this year. And Scotland did not stand transfixed in the headlights of international attention. We rose instead to the challenge of change. The people will not disappear back into the political shadows, and the nation will not fade into the dark. The country has changed, and changed utterly. And that is why that change will carry us forward to independence.
Well, typically fighting speech there from Alex Salmond, predicting that Scotland will be an independent country. He said it was now on the part of its final journey. But I thought a speech in which he also laid some clear markers down about how he sees that potential route to independence. He said the priority for the SNP now must be to win the UK elections in Scotland next year. In other words, to be the largest party in Scotland. Also, a clear warning he gave to the main unionist parties. He said if they backtracked on the promise of more powers, home rule he called it, for Scotland, if they backtracked and did not give Scotland those powers, then in his words, Scotland will take matters into our own hands. Now that, I think, will be seen by many as a clear warning that if there is any attempt to hold back or to fudge the delivery of home rule, then that, he believes, would provide the legitimacy potentially for another referendum. Now, why that is so significant, of course, is because Mr. Salmond has always said that he believed the referendum would settle this issue for a generation. Clearly, the view is that if Scots do not get home rule, then that issue is once again reopened and the possibility of another vote is very much on the table. Nicola Sturgeon, of course, now takes over. Praise for Nicola Sturgeon. He praised what she had achieved so far, but also said he believed she would achieve history. So a sense that for the SNP, far from being calmed down, as he put it, or quietened down, this was a moment when actually they could reignite their campaign for independence.
OK, for now, Norman, up there at the SNP conference in Perth, many thanks.